I never thought I'd be writing something like this. My wife, let's call her Emily, and I have been together for almost 10 years, married for 7. It's hard to even remember the good times right now, but there were plenty. We were that couple everyone looked up to, college sweethearts, joint bank account, talks of starting a family soon. She was my best friend, and I thought I was hers. Looking back now, I can't help but wonder if the signs were always there. We had a pretty normal life, both working full-time jobs, hanging out with friends on the weekends, date nights at our favorite restaurant. But something shifted about 6 months ago, subtle at first. She started coming home late, said work was getting busier. She'd laugh it off, kiss me on the cheek, and say she was exhausted. At first, I believed her. Why wouldn't I? But then, I started noticing the little things. She'd get defensive if I asked where she was or if she'd been out. The constant texting, her phone glued to her hand, never leaving it on the table when we ate like she used to. She said it was just friends from work, but it felt different. The physical intimacy faded too. We hadn't had sex in weeks, and every time I tried to bring it up, she brushed me off. I'm tired, or let's talk about it later. I tried to be understanding, thinking maybe it was just stress from work or something. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That nagging doubt just kept growing, gnawing at me. It all came crashing down one night when I was doing something as mundane as looking for my phone charger. Hers was closer, so I grabbed it from her purse without thinking. But her phone screen lit up, and I saw a text from a name I didn't recognize. It was a simple message, just "Last night was amazing, can't wait to see you again," face blowing a kiss, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. I froze. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the messages. There were dozens, no, hundreds of them. All from this guy, someone named Chris. Some of them were flirty, some downright graphic. My stomach churned as I kept reading. The reality I had refused to face was staring back at me in black and white. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there, phone in hand, heart racing, my mind in overdrive. Do I confront her now? Wait? I felt like I was outside my own body, watching it all unfold. Emily was in the shower, completely unaware that her secret was no longer a secret. By the time she walked out of the bathroom, I had made my decision. I couldn't sit on this. I couldn't let her lie to me for another second. My voice was shaky when I asked, "Who the hell is Chris?" She froze, towel wrapped around her body, eyes wide. For a moment, she didn't say anything, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was trying to figure out how much I knew, how she could spin it. And that's when the lying started. She started with the classic denial. "What are you talking about? I don't know any Chris." But I wasn't falling for it. I held her phone up, the text messages still open. "Don't lie to me, Emily. I've seen everything." Her expression shifted from shock to anger, like somehow, I was the one who had done something wrong. "It's not what you think," she snapped, grabbing her phone back. "He's just a friend. It's harmless." I felt something inside me break at those words. Harmless? The texts weren't harmless, they were full of passion, lust, things she hadn't said to me in months. I could barely contain my anger. Harmless? You've been sleeping with him. Emily's face turned red, but she still didn't admit to anything. "It's just sex," she said quietly. "It doesn't mean anything. I still love you." The audacity of it all, the calm way she said it, like I should somehow be okay with it, made my blood boil. "Just sex? That's your excuse?" I yelled, pacing the room. "You've been lying to me for God knows how long, sneaking around, and now you expect me to be okay because it means nothing?" She started crying, real tears this time, but I couldn't even tell if they were genuine or just another part of her act. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she sobbed. It just happened. I swear, it's over. But I didn't believe her. I couldn't. How many lies had I heard over the past few months? How many times had she come home late, looked me in the eyes, and told me everything was fine? Every memory felt tainted now, every smile, every laugh. Were they all fake? I stormed out of the bedroom, not sure where I was even going. My head was spinning, my heart racing. I needed air, space, something to make sense of this nightmare. I ended up sitting in my car, staring at the dashboard, feeling more lost than I ever had in my life. I texted my best friend, Matt, asking if I could crash at his place for the night. I couldn't be in the same house as her, not now. Matt didn't ask many questions when I showed up at his door, just handed me a beer and let me vent. I told him everything, about Chris, the texts, the lies. He listened quietly, his face growing darker as I unraveled the story. "You're sure this is the first time?" he asked after a long pause. I shrugged. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. I thought so, but now I don't know. I don't know what to believe. The next few days were a blur of anger, sadness, and confusion. Emily tried calling, texting, begging me to come home. She said she was sorry, that we could fix this, but I wasn't ready to hear any of it. How could I trust her again after this? But things got worse. After a week of staying at Matt's, I decided I needed to confront Emily one last time. Maybe it was a mistake, but I needed closure. I needed answers. When I walked back into our home, she looked broken, sitting at the kitchen table, tissues scattered everywhere. "I'm sorry," she whispered as soon as she saw me. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." But just as I was starting to let my guard down, something else slipped out. "There was someone else," she mumbled, barely audible. My stomach dropped. "What did you just say?" She looked up at me, eyes full of guilt. "It wasn't just Chris," she admitted. "There was another guy, a few months ago. It didn't last long. It was just a mistake." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Another guy? This wasn't some isolated incident, this was a pattern. She had been lying to me, cheating on me for who knows how long. I couldn't even speak. My mind was racing, trying to process the betrayal. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, had been hiding this whole other life from me. I walked out again, not saying a word, and didn't look back. After that second bombshell, I couldn't stay. I left without another word, feeling like my entire world had shattered around me. The drive back to Matt's was a blur. My chest was tight, my throat dry, like I couldn't breathe properly. All I could think about was how everything I thought I knew was a lie. How many other secrets was she hiding? I stayed with Matt for a few more days, avoiding Emily's calls, texts, and even her desperate messages on social media. She tried everything, apologies, excuses, even claiming she'd been going through a phase. A phase? As if cheating on me, twice, was some minor blip in her life. I didn't know how to respond to that level of insanity. I was torn between anger and sadness, unable to think straight. Part of me wanted to go back, confront her again, scream in her face for lying to me over and over. The other part wanted to curl up in a ball and pretend this whole nightmare wasn't real. My thoughts went back and forth like a pendulum, each swing making me more emotionally exhausted than the last. Eventually, I had to start thinking about next steps. I couldn't hide from this forever. My work was suffering. I had been taking sick days because I couldn't bear to face anyone. I knew people were starting to talk. I could feel the curious glances from coworkers and friends, though none of them knew the full story. How could they? Hell, I barely knew the full story myself. Matt tried to be supportive, offering advice like, "You need to decide what you want to do," but what did I want to do? The love I had for Emily hadn't just vanished, but how could I stay with her after this? How could I trust her when she had been lying to my face for months, maybe years? I began doing what anyone does these days when their life is in freefall. I took to Reddit. I spent hours on the r/relationship_advice subreddit, reading posts from other people going through similar situations. Some stayed, some left. Some were able to work things out through therapy, others saw their marriages implode. I didn't know which way I was leaning yet, but reading about others' experiences helped me feel less alone. But then came the kicker. Just when I thought I had hit rock bottom, I found out something that pushed me even deeper into the abyss. One night, after a few beers, Matt hesitantly told me he had heard a rumor through a mutual friend that Emily's affair with Chris had started much earlier than I thought. "It's been going on for over a year, man," he said cautiously, like he didn't want to hurt me more than I already was. "A year?" I repeated, feeling numb. I had suspected things were bad, but a year? That meant every holiday, every family gathering, every moment we shared for the past 12 months was tainted. Every memory felt fake, like a cruel joke I had been living in without realizing. I didn't know whether to believe him. I wanted to tell myself Matt was wrong, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. The distance between us, the defensiveness, the weird excuses, it had all started long before I found that text. I felt sick. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. It was like my body was shutting down from the emotional overload. A couple of days later, I finally mustered the strength to meet Emily in person. It had to happen. I needed answers. I needed closure, one way or another. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral ground. She looked awful, like she hadn't slept in days, her makeup barely hiding the dark circles under her eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She started crying as soon as I sat down, her voice shaky as she repeated her apologies. "I know I messed up," she said. "I don't know what's wrong with me. I've been going through so much, and I made stupid choices. But I still love you." I didn't even know what to say to that. How could she claim to love me after everything? How could she look me in the eyes and say those words? My heart ached, but my mind had already started to shut her out. "Is it true?" I finally asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Has it been going on for a year?" She hesitated, her lip quivering. And that hesitation was all the answer I needed. When she finally spoke, her words were like daggers. "Yes," she admitted. "But it didn't mean anything. I was confused, and I didn't want to hurt you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Didn't want to hurt me?" I repeated, feeling a rush of anger flood through me. "You've been lying to me for a year, Emily. A year. How is that not hurting me?" "I know," she sobbed. "I know I was wrong, but I didn't know how to stop it. I thought maybe it would just fizzle out, and things could go back to normal between us." Normal? There was no normal anymore. There hadn't been normal in a long time. I looked at her, sitting there across from me, the woman I once thought I'd grow old with, and felt nothing but a hollow emptiness. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I asked, not really expecting an answer. "Why didn't you give me the chance to fix things, before it got this bad?" She just shook her head, offering the same excuses. "I didn't want to lose you," she said again, as if that somehow justified everything she had done. But she had lost me. That much was clear. There was no coming back from this. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. I didn't know what else to say. I had all the answers I needed, and none of them made me feel any better. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor, and without another word, I walked out. I don't know if she followed me. I didn't look back. All I knew was that it was over. I was done. The days after that were a blur. I finally told my family what had happened, and they were as shocked as I was. My mom cried, my dad tried to be stoic, but I could see the anger in his eyes. You deserve better, they both said, over and over again. And maybe they were right. I filed for divorce the next week. I didn't want to drag it out. The quicker I could move on, the better. But the emotional fallout was harder to deal with. The nights were the worst. Lying in bed alone, the silence was deafening. I would replay every moment of our marriage in my head, trying to figure out when things had gone so wrong. Had I missed the signs? Could I have done something differently? The self-doubt was crippling. But eventually, slowly, I started to heal. Therapy helped. Talking to friends helped. And time, well, time doesn't heal all wounds, but it does dull the pain a bit. One day, months after the dust had settled, I ran into an old mutual friend who told me something that almost made me laugh. Apparently, Emily and Chris didn't last. He had moved on to someone else just a few weeks after she and I split. It was almost poetic, in a twisted way. The man she had thrown everything away for wasn't even willing to stick around. At first, I thought I'd feel some kind of satisfaction hearing that, but I didn't. I just felt sad for her. Sad for what she had thrown away. Sad for the life we could have had if things had been different. But mostly, I felt relieved. Relieved that it wasn't my problem anymore. Looking back now, I can see the red flags I ignored. The distance, the defensiveness, the lies, there were so many signs that things weren't right. But I had convinced myself that everything was fine, that she loved me, and that we were happy. It's funny how love can blind you to the truth, even when it's staring you right in the face. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that you can't control other people. You can't make someone love you or be faithful to you. And sometimes, no matter how hard you try, things just fall apart. It's not your fault. It's not something you could have fixed. As for me, I'm still working on putting the pieces back together. I'm not sure if I'll ever be ready for another relationship, but I do know this: I deserve better. I deserve someone who will love me for who I am, not someone who will lie to my face while sneaking around behind my back. To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't let anyone gaslight you into thinking you're crazy for asking questions. You deserve honesty, and you deserve respect. I wish I had seen it sooner, but sometimes, the hardest lessons are the ones we need the most.